Welcome to the Random Onion podcast, where we post pictures of our feet online. And like James Gunn, we're going to run that joke into the ground.
Here on the Random Onion, which we're doing or something. I don't know. I'm 2 beers deep.
Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra. So here on the Random Onion,
I'm Caden. This is Adam.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know yet.
Yes. Do I want people to know that I'm Adam? I'm the first man. I am the original Adam. That's what you don't know.
Interesting.
I have been alive this entire time, and now here I am reviewing movies on YouTube.
Why did one of your sons kill the other one? No.
So anyway, here on the Random Onion, we are currently going through the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as the third one has just recently came out a few weeks ago, and we wanted to talk about it. We have gone through volumes 1 and 2, and we do kind of want to talk a little bit about the interim, because they were very important in both Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah, we'll eventually review Infinity War, Endgame, all those other Avengers movies. Hell, we might even end up re-reviewing these when we do like a whole Marvel arc. But we did want to get these out. So, in Infinity War, the only thing that really happens that's like really real major is Gamora gets yeeted off a cliff by her dad.
Yes, Gamora dies, and that's an Endgame.
Yeah, her and Peter also, like, at the end of the second one, they kind of, admit that they have feelings for each other. They're full on dating in this one.
Yes.
In Infinity War.
And actually, in Infinity War. I said Endgame by mistake.
Yeah. And then in Endgame, after, they undo Thanos' snap and everyone gets brought back, we're actually introduced to an alternate Gamora. We're going to refer to her as Gamora 2.
Yes, Gamora 2 is the perfect example, is the perfect way to talk about this Gamora. Because Gamora has been a very steady character throughout the series, and she's about to take a pretty drastic change.
I don't like it. I don't like it. There's a lot that I like about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and there's a lot more that I don't like, I think.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's get straight to it.
All right. So, in Infinity War, yeah, Gamora dies. Nebula has a complete character arc where she becomes a good guy.
Yes.
So she does become a good guy in the movies. It's kind of the more important part to me, is because Nebula actually very slowly becomes one of my favorite characters.
She's a very compelling character. They did good with her. That's one of the only things about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I mean, not even really this movie. Anyways, getting straight into Guardians of the Galaxy 3, we open up this movie with Rocket singing Creep by Radiohead.
Yes, we have moved to another generation of music.
Yeah. The thing about this is, I like that song. I really do. It doesn't sound like they're singing the Radiohead version of that song in the movie.
That's actually something, because they've done different versions of a lot of the songs.
Yeah.
In the opening of the first movie, the Come and Get Your Love is actually a re-recording of it.
Really?
It's not the original.
I didn't know that.
Song. Because, in the original, it drives people crazy. It drove me crazy when I first found it. Because if you download the original song, it takes 40, 50 seconds for it to actually go. It just very slowly starts off. You've got to go, come and get your love.
Huh. I didn't know that at all.
It's very slow. But there is actually a re-release of the Guardians version, which it's still a good song, but it's definitely not the original.
And then, Rocket's wandering around. Then, this is one of the things I really don't like about this movie is Adam Warlock shows up, and the shot of Adam Warlock flying in is so bad.
I actually, this is one of the experiences, because we both went and saw this movie in the theater with our wives, and I was curious to ask you how you felt about how much I laughed at this at points that were not supposed to be funny.
I could tell Adam had been drinking.
I pre-gamed before we watched this movie. And then I I realized I got really drunk when we were watching it because I had a couple of really freaking strong beers. And they were big beers, too. So.
Yeah, I could smell the beer, too. I'm sitting there like, oh, shit. And then it's just a random laughter when the theater would be completely silent. It was like, I'm sitting there trying not to laugh my ass off.
I found a lot of things funny in this movie that weren't supposed to be funny. Yes, Adam Warlock flying in, because the last time we saw him was at the end of Volume 2. Now, in universe, I'm pretty sure this is 10 years past.
Something like that. Yeah, it's got to be like 2025 almost.
Yeah, now I know some of these characters did get blipped in the freaking thing, which is, honestly, that's another thing we'll get to when we get to the later ones. I fucking hate that they refer to it as the blip. It makes it sound like it's just this stupid little thing that happened where everyone disappeared for 5 years. And I hate it.
Yeah. All right, so Adam Warlock comes in and he absolutely mops the floor with the entire Guardians team.
Yes. I would wonder what kind of power scales is Adam Warlock on?
In the comics, he's insane. Like, he's insanely powerful. He can go toe-to-toe with Thanos. Okay. But in this movie, like, he's dumb.
Yes.
He is so dumb in this movie. And he's done...
Well, they kind of explain it where they say, like, you let him out too early, and he almost has, like, the mind of a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
In an adult body. But he doesn't act like a 3-year-old. Sometimes he's completely determined, like he's on a mission to do something. But then he turns out to be completely stupid.
Yes, and it's just... It's irritating. Like, especially to see a character that's, had that much hype behind him turn out like that.
You could almost, with the exception of the opening scene where he injures Rocket, which is the entire crux of the plot of this movie, he almost could be completely deleted from the movie.
Yeah.
Change almost nothing.
Also in this, like, he beats the ever-living crap out of Nebula. And can Nebula just not die?
That's the thing, because Nebula constantly, whenever she gets, like, attacked or hit, she always does this weird, like, jerky movement where she's like, putting herself back together.
But it's weird. Why didn't she do that when she got shot in Endgame? Like, the more I think about it, the worse this movie gets for me. Yeah. And that's... because I walked in there wanting to like it. I was looking forward to seeing this. And it didn't do horrible on my grading scale, but there's a lot that I don't like.
Yeah. So, but on top of that, like, Adam Warlock is shown to be really freaking powerful, and Nebula puts herself back together and eventually, like, walks up behind him and just stabs him.
Yeah!
And it's described that Rocket has given her some upgrades, but Rocket has given her the upgrade of a sword that can stab through.
It's like the scene in freaking, what is it, Pacific Rim, where the Jaeger just randomly has a sword.
It's not as bad as that.
Yeah.
That scene, I have to go on a tangent since you brought that up, because I love this movie. I love that movie, but that fucking scene. They go through this giant fucking 20-minute boss fight of fighting these two kaiju.
And the fight is beautiful.
It's very beautiful. It's so well done. But then they get to the end of the fight, and they have written themselves into this corner where this fucking kaiju randomly sprouts wings and flies him up to the stratosphere.
And that is a cool scene, too, when it's just boom.
It's so cool. But then they're like, how do we save our good guys? Because they need to get to the end of the movie. And then she's like, this fucking co-pilot that she's supposed to be this super smart person suddenly remembers that there's a fucking sword.
Not only that, they are neurally linked. They should both know that. And Charlie Hunnam has no idea.
He has no idea that they have this fuck-off sword. That just, like, if they could make this sword, like, why wouldn't they they know where the freaking breach is. Why didn't they just put multiples of this sword over the breach? So every time a kaiju came through, it just got immediately cut.
A bunch of, like, weed whackers with the swords.
Because this sword annihilates them.
Anyways, Nebula just randomly has a sword hand, and she never uses it again for the rest of the movie.
Yes.
So we get through all that, and now the main crux of the movie is Rocket is dying because Adam Warlock just pushes shit in. And they're trying to fix him, and they can't do it because he's got like a kill switch attached to his heart. And they have to track like who made this kill switch, and they track it to this corporation.
So,
or whatever.
I have a few things to say. because this is where world building really comes in this. And hold on, let me see something real quick. Yes. So everyone gets injured in this scene, and they have, or not everyone, but multiple of our characters get injured, and they have these med packs that they can just slap on to whatever's wrong, and it just fixes it.
Yes.
Instantly. So they try to put it on Rocket, and for some reason it interferes with Rocket's circuitry as to him being like, because the Rocket's whole thing throughout this whole thing is he doesn't really know he's a raccoon. He's been some like weird.
He's an experiment,
and he's been told he's actually said earlier in the previous one of the previous two movies where he didn't ask to be ripped apart again and again and put back together, so on and so forth. But somehow these med packs affect his biology differently because of this whole setup, and they have a kill switch, as what they describe, to kill him. But the biggest problem I have with this is where the fuck did these med packs come from? Because if they had these med packs up until now, or if this was a brand new invention, if they had already had them, what the fuck? Because Rocket was on Earth for 5 years in Endgame, and Rhodey still has to use the freaking.
That's a good point.
They never do anything to help.
I know what it is. Rocket's racist. No.
Well, Rhodey is just one example, but they have these med packs that can immediately mend broken bones.
Maybe it was a new invention during the 5 years they were gone, but even if it is, it's like explain it in the movie.
They already know about it. It's like they know about it. Like they just know, like, we just got to get these med packs and everyone will be fine. But it's such a world-building disaster because of the implications of what these med packs could mean to other characters and other things that happened. And then,
so they go to... After all this, they figure out there's this corporation that they need to go to, which is funny. They have corporations in space. Yes. And they show up, and immediately when they show up, they run into Sylvester Stallone's character, who's just floating outside the ship. And this is probably one of the scenes I personally liked a little bit more was the scene of the Ravager that uses the sling ring, getting everybody onto the ship, just because the scene is choreographed well.
But why did they connect the ship with an umbilical cord before they did that?
That's a good question. That just goes into the writing, But I mean, the scene.
Also, no, this is coming from someone. I haven't watched much of Phase 4 or 5 or any of this shit. Where the fuck did Ravager get a sling ring from?
Okay, so in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, you can actually see that character because that character's a sorcerer. You can actually see him doing spells and stuff with the emote stuff. It's the same kind of stuff. They confirmed it a long time ago that character was a sorcerer.
Okay, I have to defer to you on that one because I honestly don't remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
because that character was in the second movie.
Okay.
But it is a scene that I really liked, and I like how the scene is choreographed and it's done. And then you get introduced to Gamora 2, and she is a bitch.
Okay, so I get the idea. I completely understand the idea that this is not the same Gamora.
Yeah.
This is a Gamora that was taken
from...
And then this is where it's so bad, because this Gamora was taken probably not too long before the events.
Probably about 20 minutes before the events of Guardians 1.
So she already had the idea that she wants to steal the orb to sell off and get away from Thanos.
Yes.
And yet... all of those things that I don't know. She doesn't have any of that.
She seems way more mean spirited than she did in Endgame.
Yeah,
and I do get it. Peter's sitting there looking at her like a sad puppy dog, and she's like all this other stuff. Nebula's told her that she and this guy dated, and she's really really mean to Peter, and it does kind of play into her character development towards the end of the movie where she is kind of she does kind of understand. Mm-hmm. But, throughout the first part of this movie, she's so mean.
She's just... I don't know. I can't describe. I just don't like. I don't like it. I don't like the direction they took her in. I get that she's a different character, but does she have to be? Because she literally was right before she was going to become the character that she was in the first movie. And admittedly, I mean, you can't turn her into the same character.
No.
She already had the same motivations.
Yeah, and they kind of flipped it on its head a little bit, where she's kind of
she's a Ravager now. She's a Ravager now, and she's joined a crew that's not Yondu's crew. So she is someone who works with a band of thieves.
You know what's funny? This kind of going back to that character, going back to her in Endgame. She straight up like betrays Thanos, and they completely gloss over it. And, like you would think that Thanos would have had more of a reaction to that, but nothing. They don't do anything with it.
Yeah. Because that's the whole thing. She has to die because she doesn't want to tell Thanos where or how to get which stone was it?
The Soul Stone.
The Soul Stone.
Yeah. Because
she knows how to get the Soul Stone. She would rather die than let Thanos get the Soul Stone.
Yeah.
And this is the same character. This is the same person. Because she would have already known where the Soul Stone was and had this mindset that she has to get away from Thanos so he doesn't find the Soul Stone.
Yeah. And then they go to this corporation, which is like a building made of, or a space station made of flesh.
I can't describe how much that was stupid to me.
Yeah, no, I didn't like that either. I think the characters' costumes,
what?
They looked like nutsacks.
Yeah, I just kept describing as the Michelin Man. They look like the Michelin Man.
That being said,
that's the guards.
Yeah, that being said, there are two scenes that I found, or two parts of this that I found really, really funny, and one of them was Nathan Fillion's cameo.
Yeah,
that was freaking hilarious. I've got one of those, and and then the scene where Drax and Mantis are trying to get through the security checkpoint, and Mantis does her little empath thing, and it's like, you are hopelessly in love with him. the dude starts hitting on Drax. Those were so funny. And then Peter and Gamora are just bickering the whole time. And Peter's like, and she's talking to this girl, and she's like, I'm telling you, she's into me. And she's like, I thought he was kind of a douchebag. And then later in the scene, he's like telling her, like, you need to turn this mic on. I need to explain to them and like do all this stuff. And she does it. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I told you she was into me. Those were like the only three parts of that whole scene that I found hilarious.
See, I found things hilarious in the scene, but not for the reasons of them trying to be hilarious. Like I said, the Michelin Man costumes are fucking
ridiculous.
Awful. The thought of, okay, so you have a space station made of flesh. Flesh is very, very much not a substance that you really want to have in space.
Yeah, it will freeze.
It does all kinds of bad things. So why would you build a space station out of flesh? Super space people, space magic people do it.
Yeah, and this is one of the issues with this movie is they gave James Gunn too much freedom with it, because he really leans into the weirdness. So it's like it was good in the first two movies, but in this movie it doesn't work. Some of the shit that he does.
I was so confused as to why they were going to the space station and why the space station was made of flesh. So. On top of that, this is why if you've watched the first two videos, you would understand. I keep bringing up that they have hockey puck size spacesuits.
And then they're wearing actual spacesuits.
They're wearing, not only are they wearing actual spacesuits, they are fucking a straight up Among Us reference.
Yeah.
They are an Among Us reference spacesuits. Everyone has a different color. And that's a whole fucking thing because Quill tries to talk to Gamora and he thinks that he presses the button that's correlated to her color. And he can talk
that part wasn't even funny. It was just
everyone. He is bearing his soul to her, and it turns out everyone can hear what he's saying. And Drax is like, it's just embarrassing.
And it sucks because you really do feel bad for Peter in this movie, and. They play it for jokes.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And it gets kind of annoying. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. So eventually, they make it into the space station, and they have to take off their suits because remember they have full-size suits that they can't just carry these suits around because they're too bulky. It's almost like maybe having a hockey puck size spacesuit would be nice, but they don't have those. So they decide. So they go to this room, and this is the thing: is that Mantis gets blamed for this, but every character puts their suit in this thing individually. Into this freaking little cubby that Mantis has found.
Right.
And then they close it because some people start coming in, and then they realize that all of their spacesuits has been blasted off into space because they are too bulky to carry around. And now they're stuck on this ship, on this flesh ship, with no spacesuits because they forgot the hockey puck ones exist.
But yeah, they get through the space station. They get what they need, which is...
I don't want to interrupt. I do want to talk. How do you feel about their costumes in this one? Because all of their costumes have completely changed. They're not as individualized.
So it's weird because I'm totally split on this. Honestly, I like the fact that they used the original costumes from like the Annihilation run of the comics. I do like that. I miss the old costumes though. Mm-hmm. Peter doesn't have his mask or rocket boots in this movie, which comes into play later in the movie, and it kind of gets irritating because it's like you establish in the previous movies that they have all this stuff and they don't use any of it.
Yes, there's so much. They add things that ruin other parts of the universe, but they completely forget about shit that they had in the previous movies.
Yeah.
Because there's a few scenes in this that Peter having his rocket boots and his masks would just immediately solve problems that he has.
And he really is a mess in this movie. It is crazy. But I mean, I will give it to him. He's determined to save his friend, and he actually refers to Rocket as his best friend multiple times in this movie, which is interesting because they didn't seem like they got along very well with the previous two.
I like how Drax, every time he says Rocket's his best friend, he says second best friend.
Which is funny because Drax talks so much shit to Peter to his face, but he considers himself his best friend, Yeah.
At what point, and I can't remember, I think it's closer, it's in this space station that happens, where we start seeing Mantis's abilities.
Yes, she's making people just like do stuff.
Yeah, because she's supposed to be an empath. She's supposed to be able to make people sleep and read people's emotions. But in this movie, there's people running at them, and she does some ninja moves and jumps on them and says, "You're a kitty cat."
Yeah,
and the guy thinks he's a kitty cat.
and then another person tells some girl to something rage.
Yeah, so she has this ability to control people's minds. And there's a scene, I'm pretty sure it's in this bit, where Mantis, Nebula, and Drax are all in this room. And Nebula and Mantis are just going at Drax, calling him a big fucking idiot, and constantly just berating him. Drax even gets to the point where he's like, I'm not sure I like this defense, because Mantis is just a complete and total bitch about Drax and tells him about it. And just tells him to his face that he's this big stupid idiot. And then she just holds his head and says, forget. And then he starts laughing. And I'm just like, when did Mantis become this horrible person? How many times has she made Drax forget about all the times
That's
that
a good question.
Stupid?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot in this movie that's... So they're at the flesh station because they're trying to look for that kill switch thing.
Yeah, they need a code to get through the kill switch and they can save Rocket.
But the code gets... And the main bad guy is a high evolutionary. We'll get into him later. But the main bad guy has sent somebody to basically take the code out. And the dude is successful in doing it. And so they figure all this out. And they track the dude to a planet which is called Counter Earth, which is it's another thing from the comics the High Evolutionary does. But in this movie, it is not done very well.
It's fucking furry bait.
Yeah, it's weird. It is super weird. And I mean, the scene is funny when Drax picks up the ball and smacks that little girl in the face with it.
Because we have to get to the second Earth thing because we haven't talked about Rocket Raccoon's backstory yet. It is both a combination of incredibly sad. This is where the emotional, because every one of these movies has an emotional thing that they want you to grasp onto. In the first one, it was Peter and the rest of the Guardians becoming friends.
Yes.
In the second one, it was more about Yondu being Peter's daddy. In this one, it's about an otter with robot arms, a rabbit named Teefs. no, it's the walrus named Teefs, and the rabbit's named Floor.
Yes. And it's like, I like a lot of these scenes. They do a good job mixing, you do really kind of get that emotional kind of grit to it and a little bit of body horror.
Yeah.
Which, I'm a big horror movie fan. Eventually we'll get into reviewing some horror movies. I don't know, which ones we're going to do. I would like to do some of the Evil Dead movies.
Yeah. That's the ones I never watched, so.
Yeah. But that being said, when these scenes show up, it completely shifts the tone of the movie, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Because it's like this movie has trouble finding its identity. This movie it seems like it doesn't really know. It doesn't want to be like a fun comedy. Doesn't want to be super emotional. Doesn't want to be body horror. Doesn't want to be straight up terrifying. What does this movie want to be? And I don't think it knows.
No, it really doesn't. It jumps back and forth between a bunch of different shit here.
But I don't, just to go over the whole kind of plot of Rocket's backstory, because it's pretty integral. You learn a lot more about the High Evolutionary in it too, and he's acted very well, I think. That being said, as a character, I know they wrote him to be kind of despicable, and they made him completely unlikable. And I will give props to James Gunn for that, because the character is unlikable. There's no redeeming qualities about him.
No.
And, a lot of those animal abuse scenes, they're kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, they are. They really are. In fact, that's why my wife never wants to watch it again, because of the animal abuse scenes.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It can be kind of hard to watch. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't. It feels like it's missing something.
It's missing something. It's missing a reason, because basically the plot of what we find out of what's happened to Rocket Raccoon and his little friends is that the High Evolutionary wants to create a second Earth, but for some reason thinks it would be better if the animals, like the normal animals that we would see on Earth, were actually the equivalent of what humans were. That is his whole goal. So in order to do that, he has created a machine to rapidly evolve animals, or animals from Earth. So he rapidly evolves a turtle, and he shows Rocket, a little kid Rocket.
They create the Michael Bay Ninja Turtle in this scene, by the way.
Yes. But they show Rocket that these animals, when they're hyper evolved. So imagine being a turtle, and suddenly within 1 second, you are a human turtle,
a ninja turtle,
ninja turtle, and for some reason that makes them become very violent.
Yeah,
and that's what High Evolutionary is trying to stop. He doesn't want them to be violent,
and Rocket figures it out immediately.
Yes, Rocket figures it out that he knows how to make them so that they're not violent, and the High Evolutionary gets mad about the fact that Rocket could figure it out, but he couldn't.
Yeah, because Rocket is portrayed, a younger Rocket is portrayed as, very, very intelligent when it comes to creating stuff, but, understanding, common sense and, just reading social situations. He is very, very dumb.
Yes.
And, yeah, I mean, it's the closest thing to a character arc we have in this movie, but it took place way before the movie even starts, Yeah,
it's a backstory. That's the whole point.
Yeah. And so, going back to because the whole story ends with all of Rocket's friends being killed. Or the backstory ends with all of Rocket's friends being killed. And then Rocket gnaws off the High Evolutionary's face.
Yeah.
And then
it's a horrifyingly sad scene.
Yeah.
Is it Lila?
Yeah.
Lila is the otter, and Floor and Teefs all get killed, and Rocket barely manages to escape.
Yeah, and I will say it's one of the more well done scenes in the movie. That section, it's very well done. It feels like you're watching a completely different movie when you're watching that versus the rest of the movie.
Yes, because the rest of the movie is fucking strange.
Yeah.
So
we're back on the Animal Planet.
Peter
cusses at Nebula.
What did you think about the couch gag that freaking Drax kept doing?
I thought it was annoying.
Couch? Yes.
I thought it was super annoying.
It's another perfect example of James Gunn just driving a joke directly into the ground. Because he just finds it funny, so he just keeps doing it over and over again. Because they show up to this planet, so they eventually realize, okay, we need help. So this is where I'm confused as hell in the theater as we're watching it. I've pieced it together since then. Admittedly, I was pretty drunk at this point when we were watching the movie. So it's treated as the Guardians showing up as like an alien invasion almost.
Yeah.
These animal creatures have no clue about the rest of the universe. And a spaceship just lands in a suburban neighborhood.
My favorite part of that whole sequence is whenever the animal people start throwing like rocks and shit at them, and Groot turns into like really, really big and starts going, ooh! They all start running away.
I would say this was the first movie I didn't like Groot.
Really?
Yeah. For most of the point, I didn't like Groot at all. Like he was buff Groot.
Yeah.
Because you have regular old Groot, then you have baby Groot, and this is buff Groot.
Yeah.
And buff Groot is my least
Groot
favorite.
doesn't really do a lot in this movie, does he?
He takes on the same thing that Chewie does in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
He becomes an Uber driver.
So they figure out where the High Evolutionary is, and Peter and Groot and Nebula decide to go see him. And the High Evolutionary is like, this is a trap, right? And Peter's like, no, it's standoff. Even though they think... Here's another thing. They scan Peter for weapons, and they scan Nebula for weapons, but they don't scan Groot.
Yes.
And Groot has all the weapons inside of him.
He's just a tree. He can't be made of weapons in him.
It's like, do you know who you're dealing with?
Yes. I want to say, before we get to this point, this is one of my favorite jokes in the movie, actually, is they're trying to get into a car to drive, and Peter... This is the first time Peter knows about cars from the 70s. Because the whole thing, like this whole Animal Planet is like based on the 70s, it seems.
Yes.
So Peter knows what a car is. But remember, he was like 6.
Yeah, he's never driven a car before.
But he gets in the car and he tries to tell Nebula to get in the car. And Nebula just holds the handle. And it doesn't open. And she's just like, what do I do now? And he says, press the button. And she starts pressing the keyhole. And he's like, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're pressing the keyhole. There's a button directly under the handle.
What do I do now? Get the fucking car!
And that's the first F-bomb in one of these movies.
Chris Pratt is awesome in these movies.
That's
He really
best, that
is.
By far the best scene in the entire movie.
They get to the checkpoint, and you kind of get a sense there at the checkpoint of like what kind of like basically the paper mache army that's there to just be annihilated is, and they're called hell spawns. They are dumb. I do not like them. The war pig.
The war pig. I honestly kind of forgot the war pig existed, but the war pig is like because we also haven't mentioned Adam. Yeah,
he comes out. He shows up on the
Warlock.
ship and just straight up gets his ass beat by Gamora, doesn't he?
We find out that freaking the High Evolutionary was the one that created the solid.
Oh yes, and like one of the other funnier scenes in the movie is when the High Evolutionary walks up to Aisha. They put the stool down and he takes a step just so he can get in her face because she's like a whole foot taller than he is.
Oh god.
It's like there are some parts of this movie that are really, really funny, and then there's the rest of the movie.
Yeah. So, there's that one scene because the High Evolutionary is trying to find them, and then they're with Aisha and Adam Warlock, and they have captured someone, and Aisha says, show him that we mean business to Adam Warlock, and he just disintegrates him into a skeleton. But then the dog didn't die, and Adam Warlock becomes immediately attached to the dog.
Yeah.
I don't even remember when that happens in the movie, but it happens in the movie.
Yeah. So you get this huge confrontation between Peter and the High Evolutionary and Groot, and you get kind of a fight scene. I honestly, I want to use the bathroom around this part. But I do know that this, like, during this, the War Pig attacks Gamora while she's washing Rocket's body, or watching, not washing.
Yes.
Just giving Rocket a bath.
Hey, he's been in that bed for a while. He's a sponge bed.
We also find out that there are toilets on the ship.
Wait, what?
on Peter Quill's ship, there are toilets.
Okay.
Because Gamora is taking a shit whenever the War Pig attacks.
Okay. Eventually, okay, so Nebula, what does she do? Because she decides that she wants to get off the planet at some point too. Because so she ends up calling.
I honestly don't remember a lot of what happens.
Because it was a Ravager. The Ravager was one that gets melted. Yeah. So they have the communication thing, and
that's
Nebula
how Aisha finds them.
Calls them. Aisha answered, and he says, "Salutations."
Yeah, how did Nebula not know that's her? Like, she's met Aisha before. She was captured by the Sovereign. And then, and not even just that. The whole, like, sequence happens. Peter and Groot escape, and they get the guy that they were trying to get the information off of his head. And when they escape, they do that whole thing where they end up landing on the ground. But while that was happening, Mantis, Nebula, and Drax break into the pyramid to go save them.
Yes.
And they get stuck and they get captured.
The planet is being destroyed. This is a major thing. That the planet is being destroyed because the High Evolutionaries called it a failure.
Yeah, and Aisha dies in the dumbest way possible.
How did she die? I can't even remember.
She gets blown up with the planet.
Okay.
Yeah. Right in front of Adam Warlock.
There's a line that the High Evolutionary says that I think is hilarious, because I think it's when Quill and Groot are jumping onto the planet. The High Evolutionary says, that's an amazing plan, jumping onto a planet that's blowing up.
I remember that. But, I mean, yeah, and I missed a good chunk of the movie, because that's whenever I went to use the bathroom, was right as they hit the ground.
So the ship is flying away. Drax, Nebula, and Mantis are trying to save Peter and Groot, who they think are on the ship, but actually they're not. So they're stuck on this little ledge on the ship as it's trying to go out into space. So they're very slowly beginning to suffocate as the planet is being destroyed beneath them. And they manage to save them in just the nick of time. Or they manage to get into the ship at just the nick of time before they all suffocate in space.
Okay.
That's a whole thing that happens.
Yeah, and then they have the obelisks from the first or from the second movie that Mantis ends up taming.
Yes, the giant
Drax becomes
the rainbow vomit monster.
Yeah,
things.
Drax ends up becoming like a dad to all these children.
Yes, the ship is filled with children, and I can't for the life of you tell you why.
Secret. Well, it's because the High Evolutionary was trying to create the perfect species, and he created all these kids.
Yeah.
It's just the movie is kind of a mess throughout this last act.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to summarize it quick because I don't have very much longer.
We haven't even mentioned Cosmo yet, the freaking dog.
I liked Cosmo.
I like Cosmo. I just looked over here at the plots and
Kraglin calls her a bad dog earlier in the movie, and she just will not leave him alone about it for the rest of the movie. It's so funny.
I am not a bad dog.
But so they bring the whole ass celestial head.
This is the problem. So much stuff fucking happens at this point.
I know it.
I cannot. I'm trying to read a plot synopsis real quick to kind of give an overview of what happened. It says Nebula, Mantis, and Drax encounter hundreds of imprisoned humanoid children on the High Evolutionary ship before being captured. Quill's group set out to rescue the three, placed in a chamber with monstrous Abolus. Yes,
yeah.
the Abolus. Mantis befriends the Abolus, allowing the group to escape and reunite with Quill's group, together overpowering the High Evolutionaries' army. And then Kraglin and Cosmo arrive with nowhere. That's a fucking weird sentence right there. Kraglin and Cosmo arrive with nowhere.
Yeah, because you remember Nowhere was coming through that little hole?
Yes. I didn't know that Nowhere was a ship that they could pilot.
I think they just recently had made it into a ship.
What? It's supposed to be it's a mining colony.
Yeah,
and they're like, we're going to turn it into a ship that
yeah,
can fly
it
through.
looked cool, but at the same time, it's like... I will say this, so whenever they finally all get together again, and you get that hallway fight sequence, that's the big one-shot sequence, I really, really liked that.
See, I was pretty drunk, so I don't remember it.
Yeah, they have this huge one-shot fight scene in this long hallway, and it's probably the best part of the movie. Honestly, it's very well done. And it's brutal too. They are brutally killing these people. And like during all of this, there's actually the High Evolutionaries people try to do a mutiny on him at one point, and he kills most of them. And he delivers one of the better villain lines in the MCU. It's better, but it's kind of cliched in my opinion. But he delivers it very well. And some girl's like around him, and she says, "Oh God," and he's like, "God doesn't exist. That's why I had to step in." And I'm like, he delivered that so well.
I'm going to be completely honest. At this point, I was probably more like Drax from Volume 2 and just laughing at stupid shit, laughing at stuff randomly. I don't remember a whole lot.
So yeah, the Guardians are trying to get these kids off the ship, the imprisoned kids, and they dock the ship with Nowhere. And while this is all happening, Kraglin figures out how to use Yondu's arrow.
Yes.
And he
Yondu,
kills a bunch of the...
appears as a vision.
Yes, yeah. I remember that because you laughed your ass off.
I'm sure I was horrible for the rest of the people in that theater.
So Kraglin kills a bunch of the... they're called Hellspores. They're the High Evolutionaries army. And they go through like this other thing. Rocket goes back into the ship because he finds like a bunch of baby raccoons, and he's like frantically trying to gather them. That's a really sad scene.
Yeah,
and
this is another point of how much shit happens in this movie.
Yeah,
I forgot that Rocket was a character for a second.
He finds a bunch of those raccoons, and he's just like trying to like gather them up. That was a good scene. But then, like, as he's trying to leave, the High Evolutionary shows up. And there's a big fight with him, the High Evolutionary, and the rest of the Guardians show up. And they beat the High Evolutionary, like, down. And it's crazy, because the High Evolutionary is supposed to be super powerful.
Doesn't he have, like, gravitational powers or something?
He gets his ass beat.
How? He just decided not to use his powers.
And then Rocket rips off his face again. And
I remember that.
Yeah, this is surprisingly bloody for a PG-13 movie. And then they go to evacuate the rest of the ship. They get all the animals off. Peter gets caught in space again, and this goes back to like he doesn't have his rocket boots or his mask in this movie.
And
so
he doesn't have any of the hockey pucks.
Yeah,
that have space suits in them. So
and it's so stupid, you know. And as he's throughout this whole thing, Adam Warlock, they actually he thought they were going to leave him to die, and they end up saving him and bringing him to Nowhere. And that's really like Adam Warlock's whole character arc.
That's the whole reason why Adam Warlock is in this movie, is to save Peter at the end.
Yeah, and it's so funny because they replicate that picture, you know, of like Adam touching fingers with God, and with Adam Warlock, and he's like reaching out to touch Peter Quill.
Well, but the dude's fucking suffocating in space. And you're trying to touch his fucking finger to reference a fucking goddamn a human-made.
And it's crazy though, because like the amount of time Peter was in space, he should be dead, like straight up dead. But they gave him one of those medic packs, and is oh god,
the Deus Ex Machina medic pack.
Yes. So you know, you get through all that. then the Guardians decide to split up at the end of the movie, and Gamora and Peter do have some closure.
I will say throughout the movie, I feel like Nebula, we haven't said much about Nebula, but Nebula really is my favorite part of this movie.
She is a very standout character.
Yeah, she's very standout.
She probably should have been the one leading the group, honestly.
Yeah. I almost feel like if there was any type of love interest, which is very mild, I don't care about love interest necessarily.
Between Peter and Nebula.
Between Nebula and Peter.
Yeah, no, I could see that too, and I was kind of expecting that.
A joke about that.
Yeah. Recently, though, Karen Gillan did come out and say that she thinks that Nebula does have kind of a crush on Peter, but she's never had that before, and she doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yes, I 100% admit.
So I think that could be an interesting dynamic at some point.
Nebula has
just maybe some point in the just maybe wait to explore that till some point in the future. Like all these characters had endings, if you want to call it that. Peter goes back to live with his grandpa. Drax and Nebula stay on Nowhere to raise all these new kids that they have.
And that's a major point I want to bring up as far as character destruction. Remember, in the second movie, Drax specifically says that his nethers were engorged because his wife wouldn't dance.
Yeah, and he starts dancing.
And he fucking dances like it's a goddamn Nickelodeon straight-to-TV movie.
Right.
This movie ends with with every character along with all the children dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what the fuck is this?
I will say that scene between Peter and his grandpa is really sweet.
It is.
It is. It's probably the better of the ending kind of scenes that we get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's over. Gamora and Peter get closure.
Gamora's off to go to the Ravagers, which I'm sure they're happy because she's the only female amongst a bunch of dudes. So
Mantis takes off with the obelisk.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna?
She calls them her honeys at the end of it too. and Rocket and Groot start a new Guardians team, and we get a post-credit scene with that, and it's like got Adam Warlock, and it's got one of the kids from.
It's let's see, the new Guardians. It's a mid-credit scene that they show consisting of a Rocket, Groot, Cosmo, Kraglin, Adam, and Fila.
Fila is actually a character from the comic. She's very, very powerful.
Okay.
She'll be, if they ever do another movie, she'll be interesting to see. I do think I would want Star-Lord to come back though, in some shape or form.
Well, remember at the very last,
it
specifically says the
legendary Star-Lord will return. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's like that's the movie. Honestly,
I just saw the little dog thing that Adam adopts is named Blurp.
That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, overall, that's the movie.
God. I feel like I could say a lot more about this movie, but I would run a lot longer. I need to watch it again sober, so I can say more about it. This movie...
We might do an updated review on this one at some point.
Yeah. This movie, so I will say this is, of all the Marvel Phase 4 and Phase 5 things that I've seen, which is not a lot, I admit it's not a lot, because I've been not paying attention to it. This is, by far, one of the best. I would probably put No Way Home above it as far as like Phase 4.
I would 100% put No Way Home above it.
Yeah. But there's these in Phase 4 and 5 so far. We have this giant pile of sludge, and we have little tiny flowers growing out. One here, which is No Way Home, and one here, which is Guardians 3. But then another animal flew by and took a shit on Guardians 3.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it.
It's like the flower was kind of deformed when it came up.
Yes. It came out with an odd number of leaves.
Yeah.
All right. Should we get to scores?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, as always, we have a number of categories that can all be scored anywhere from 1 to 100. And 1 being the lowest, 100 being the highest. And then we combine all those scores together at the end to create the final score for the movie. And we will start with plot.
So for plot with this one, Honestly, I feel like my score is a little high. But I mean, as usual, if you guys haven't been able to figure that out, I'm the one who gives higher scores. He's the one that gives lower scores. We even each other out. Plot with this one. Guardians of the Galaxy 1, I gave a 90 for plot. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I gave it an 80. This movie, I gave the plot a 44.
44. That's a huge downgrade.
That is a very big downgrade. So. And it's because the plot feels like it's just going nowhere.
Yeah, I didn't see a through line for this
movie.
There was no real reason for this movie to exist other than they needed to make a Guardians 3 to keep people interested in the Guardians movies or in Marvel in general. So, for me, I gave Guardians Volume 1 a 72, Volume 2 a 55. I give this one a 36. This was a huge, huge fucking downgrade.
Yeah.
In so many ways. I still can't. I'm just laughing because of how drunk I was watching it. Anyways, next up is story structure.
This story structure is also a massive downgrade for me. I mean, the tone was choppy. They kept switching back and forth, which, I mean, I don't mind a backstory as long as, it feels like it's going somewhere. And it does kind of relate with High Evolutionary and whatnot. And you're learning more about Rocket, which is the closest thing to character development we really get in this movie. That being said, the change of tone was not good for me. And, that really brings down your ability to tell a story. That being said, I still gave it a 61, which, I mean, isn't horrible. I mean, it's bad for me, but...
So, for story structure for me, this was the first one in this series of Volume 1, 2, and 3 that I actually gave a lower score for story structure than I did for plot. Because in both the other ones, I gave the story structure a higher score. So this one got a 30 from me. This story was disjointed. It had no fucking clue what it was trying to actually do or say. And it had half of its characters, they didn't even know why they were there.
Yeah. I agree with that, honestly.
Yes. All right, and speaking of characters, next up is characters.
All right, so characters for this one. I don't really know how to put this into words. It's a downgrade. It's definitely a downgrade from the last one. That being said, you still have some of those characters there, and there are a lot of characters that I still like the characters, That being said, if the characters were as consistent as they were in the first two movies, I probably would have given this an 80 or 90, but they are not, so I gave them a 75.
Okay, so characters for me, I just had to downgrade it because as we've been talking about it, I realized I gave it way too fucking high of a score for characters. Because I feel like most of the characters, there's still some consistencies amongst the characters, but there's a lot of things that I feel like completely annihilate. The fact that Mantis has become this fucking crazy psychopathic bitch that can make people forget stuff. Drax doesn't even know why he's there anymore. And not only that, his character is destroyed because he's supposed to be this person that doesn't dance and completely fell in love with his wife because she didn't dance. Well, he's like, in the second movie, he's like, she wouldn't even tap a foot. It would make his nether regions engorge. So
he should see our feet pics.
So I had to give characters a lower score, so I got it down to a 38.
Oh shit!
Characters I think were pretty well not annihilated, but were very damaged in this movie. All right, next up is world building.
World building. This is another massive downgrade. I honestly think I should have given this a lower score, but again, I'm just gonna stick to it until I rewatch the movie. I give it a 61, which, I mean, as people who've paid attention know, that's not good for me at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave it a 61.
World building for me is completely destructive. It's like a nuclear bomb went off.
Yeah, I was actually, as we were talking about the movie, I was looking forward to hearing what your score was, and I'm gonna take a wild guess. Is it in the 20s?
Yes.
Oh, I'm good.
It is in the 20s. world building in this movie, I am so frustrated with the fact that not only have they completely ignored the rest of the Marvel universe, but they've ignored things from the previous movies that are very well established and are huge plot points of both movies. And they have just decided it doesn't exist because they want to make a fucking Among Us reference. Or they want to make some stupid fucking joke. And the fact that they have a space station that's made of flesh and how stupid that is. And the fucking Michelin Men soldiers.
Led by Nathan Fillion.
Yes. So I gave world building a 28.
Ooh, man.
Next up is acting.
This is actually probably the most positive thing about this movie, in my opinion. Definitely not the highest scored thing I have on here. But it's probably the best thing about this movie is some of the acting that goes on, especially from Chris Pratt. And the dude who plays the High Evolutionary does a very good job. Rocket, again, good.
Yeah.
Everyone's been playing these roles so long, it's like a second skin for them almost.
Yeah.
The acting isn't as good as like the previous movies, but it's still good. Especially the scene with Peter's like freaking the fuck out about Rocket like flatlining. That is a very, very well acted scene.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that is like one of the positives of this movie. That is a very positive for me of this movie. I gave it an 85 or an 80, not an 85.
80. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to say about acting in this one. This is why it got the score that it did for me. I can't say that there are any real standout things. I can say some things I like. The High Evolutionary, I found him to be too screamy. He screamed a lot in this movie. Most of the other characters, the acting, it's just kind of like, it's honestly kind of what I've come to expect from Marvel in general right now.
Yeah.
Which is why it got a higher than average score, but only a score of 55 for me. All right, next up is special effects.
Yeah, this one took a hit. Honestly, I'm tempted to change this one again just because like this is not very good. But I mean, so this is where kind of the split happened, and I considered giving this like a very low score on special effects just because of that opening shot of Adam Warlock. But the more I think about it, the more it's like most of the CGI isn't bad.
No, yeah.
You have like a few shots that are just awful, and they are all of Adam Warlock. And so it's like usually when the CGI is as good as a normal Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I give it like a 7 or like an 80 at least, you know. I gave this one a 60.
60?
Yeah.
All right. So this is actually one of the weird splits that we have. I actually gave it a higher score than you.
Really?
Yeah. I honestly, even though I found a lot of it stupid, I thought a lot of the special effects were fine. They were pretty decent. Like the Adam Warlock thing, I still can't.
That bothers me so much.
Yeah. I still am. I'm laughing right now about how
and it's crazy though because
I burst out laughing when he first showed up.
Yeah, you did. I remember that, and I was just like, "Oh man, that looks terrible." And if it looked good, like you combine that with the music that they were playing at that scene, the music of that scene was good.
Yeah,
the scene looked horrible.
That being said, I feel like Rocket still looks good. Groot, as far as I don't like buff Groot, he still looks good. I liked the Rocket's friends. I felt like they were very well animated. So I ended up giving special effects a 70. I felt like there was a lot of it that was good. There was definitely it got a lower score than the previous movie, but it was still a decent score. All right, next up is score, the music of the movie.
So the music isn't as good as the other two movies. I mean, clearly we've established that. That being said, I do like a lot of the music they have in there. But I'm also like a fan of a lot of 90s music, so there is that. I gave score an 85.
85?
Yeah. Which may be a bit high, but I'm going to give it the benefit of a doubt here.
This for me was another thing where I have very little to say positive or negative about the music. I don't really remember most of the music from this movie, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, because I think I did like it at the time when we were watching it. I just can't remember what it was, which is so different compared to the first two movies, where there are bits of music that I could specifically point out and talk about how much I like it.
Yeah.
So this movie, since I didn't have anything positive or negative to say, but I knew that some of the songs were kind of okay, it got a slightly above average score of 55, which is a huge downgrade in music, because music has been continuously the highest score for me in this series. All right, next up is cinematography.
I feel like a lot of the cinematography was pretty good in this movie. I will say this, I did give it bonus points for that big one-shot fight scene in the hallway. That scene is very, very well done.
See, I barely remember that, so I'm going to have to watch it again.
Yeah, I mean, you were drunk.
I was pretty drunk.
But yeah, no, that I loved that scene. That scene made the movie for me. And, I mean, other than that, I mean, like we were saying, there's a lot of interesting special effect choices, and with James Gunn, he's always going to bring some really cool stuff on the screen. It's just like going back to the special effects. If you didn't have those Adam Warlock shots in there, that score would have been a lot higher, I'd imagine. Cinematography wise, though, those shots didn't really affect what I thought of this movie. I gave it a 75.
Cinematography for me in this movie, I have little to say. Once again, I have very little to say positive or negative. Like, there were some shots that I find that were funny, some shots that I found that were good. This score got a perfect average for me of 50. All right, last up is the most important, is fun. How much did you actually like the movie?
Well, I didn't hate it. I definitely did not hate it. That being said, I didn't particularly think it was mind-blowingly amazing. For me, it kind of sits on that. Whenever I think of an average movie, I think of something that, I don't really laugh. I just kind of sit there through the movie, kind of, okay, whatever. This movie, I was able to laugh a little bit. I was able to have a little bit of a good time, so I did give it kind of an above average fun score. I gave it 62.
62.
Yeah.
I did not like this movie. This movie got a pretty low score in fun for me. I liked it more than some other movies. Like, I liked it, not to spoil what happens with Wakanda and Multiverse of Madness, but I liked it more than those movies.
That's not a high bar to clear, though. I cannot wait to watch Multiverse of Madness again so I can review it.
It's so bad. So, fun for this movie. So, I want to point out, I really liked the first movie. I gave it an 85. I really liked the second movie. I gave it a 78. This movie got a 30.
Oh, God.
Fun for me.
Well, I mean, like...
I had more fun being drunk in the movie theater.
Yeah.
I did actually watching the movie.
Yeah, this movie doesn't really stick the landing.
No. So what was your final score?
My final score was a 66.33.
My final score is a 43.6.
54.96.
This movie is...
a solid D.
Yeah, it's a solid D. It's slightly above average for us, basically.
Let's see where it lands on the list.
So, for anyone who is interested in it, that means our final score for it at a 54.9 is a 5.5 out of 10, is what we gave Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
So, the list. We've been referencing this in the past 3 Guardians of the Galaxy episodes. These aren't the first episodes we have recorded of the list, but they will probably be the first that we release. So, that being said, I don't want to spoil some of the other movies on this list, but they are all Star Wars films. I'm not going to spoil which ones are where. If you know anything about Star Wars, you could probably imagine which ones. So far, we have 10 total movies reviewed, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, or Volume 3, sits at number 9.
Number 9? Oh, jeez.
Yes. Which is crazy, because Guardians of the Galaxy number 1 sits at number 2.
Yeah.
And Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is ranked in 4th place.
Jeez. That is such a huge drop off.
That is a huge drop off.
It's terrible. And that's the thing. It's like it's at the end of the second movie, you really want to know what happens next, especially with Adam Warlock being teased. But then when they finally got to it, they're like, we don't have no fucking clue what to do with this.
Yeah, they just
let's just make a bunch of stuff.
What they should have done is, because in the original Infinity War comics, Adam Warlock is like, he's such a big deal. He's such a big character. He should have been in that movie. And he should have been in Endgame. But he wasn't. And
well, they couldn't, probably because they had Captain Marvel. So
yeah, I mean, don't even get me started with Captain Marvel. We'll go over that movie. That might be one of the lowest scored movies I ever do. I do not like that movie at all, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, that's a movie to get to.
I might have to drink during that one too. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to the list. Please like and subscribe, and if you're new here, go check out our feed pics.
Yes, on feedfinder.com.